All right, let's continue on in our little study here on the places in Revelation. I don't know, it just struck me one day as I was going through the book of Revelation. I've heard of these places before. A lot of the places that are referenced in Revelation are really throughout history, throughout the accounts. So I want to kind of see why. Why are they referenced? What do they mean when they talk about these places? And we started first with Asia, those churches of Asia. Why pick on them? Why single them out? Asia is actually a very small area of the tip of Turkey, all along the coast there. And it's those 7 churches that he kind of focuses on. And as we saw, it was a good reason. Throughout Paul's ministry, throughout the early church, the churches of Asia were the problem. They're the ones that kept sending Jews from those churches to the other areas to cause problems for Paul. They're the ones where the Gentiles who worshiped other gods and were silversmiths and things like that were keep going against Paul. Even as Paul writes 2 Timothy, he notes that the people in Asia have turned against him. So they just throughout his ministry, they were the hard-headed ones, which makes sense. That as Jesus looking down, he's going to pick on them a little bit, right? You've been picking on my guy, I'm going to pick on you. Here's some problems. And we noted that in every time he spoke to one of those churches in Asia, he said, there is hope. If you turn to me, I will save you, right? Even if the church doesn't, you individually come. So even in these hard-headed areas, it's kind of the hardest stone in the church, was there still hope for any who turn to Jesus Christ? So we saw that in Asia. Now, last week we looked at the Euphrates River, which in the book of Revelation is very important because it is the last of the judgments of God, where he dries up the Euphrates River, which allows then the armies of man to come and march on Jerusalem. They will not be successful, because who comes at Armageddon? Jesus comes to save his people. But throughout the Bible, all the way back to the very beginning, Euphrates was one of the rivers of Eden. But also, it was interesting because Euphrates is seen as the border. I call it the border of God's blessing. It was from Egypt to the Euphrates River, much further out than we think it is. We always think of it as kind of the area they conquered. But God was very clear. The promised land went from Egypt all the way to Euphrates. And we found it interesting that throughout the Bible, God sent his judgment, the Assyrians, the Babylonians, the stuff, across what river? The Euphrates. So if they were not going to stay in God's good blessing and not follow him and obey him, he was going to bring judgment from where? From outside the area of blessing. And we also saw that when they came back from Babylon, which is just on the other side of the Euphrates, when they got back there were many people living in God's blessed area who are from the other side. To the people saying what? You can choose this day whom you will serve, right? It can be the gods of your forefathers, the gods of the people on the other side of the flood, which is the Euphrates River. You can choose those guys outside the area of blessing, or you can do like me and my family and choose who? Choose to serve the Lord, right? So we see Euphrates as very much that kind of, this is the border, this is the area, and I will bring judgment from that side if I need to, if you're not right with him. Now today we're going to look at the other side of that border. What was the one? Euphrates. What was the other side? Egypt. And Egypt's very different. In fact, let's go to Revelation and look at where it's referenced. Revelation chapter 11. And this is the only reference to Egypt. Revelation chapter 11, we're going to start in verse 7. Now here we are, if you want to know kind of the timeline of the end times, this is the time of the 2 witnesses. The 2 witnesses that will be in Jerusalem, and they will basically, for 3.5 years, they will testify of the coming of Jesus Christ. The beast will have no power over them. Mankind will have no power. Nobody can shut them up. Nobody can do anything against them until God says so. And that's where we pick up in chapter 11, verse 7. And when they shall have finished their testimony, the beast that ascendeth out of the bottomless pit shall make war against them and shall overcome them and kill them. So we know. But the only reason is because who allows it? God allows it. And their dead bodies shall lie in the street of the great city, which spiritually is called Sodom and Egypt, where also our Lord was crucified. So what city are we talking about? Jerusalem. This is the great city, the place where Jesus, the Christ, was killed. And he refers to it here with two descriptors. One, Sodom, by the way. Does anybody want their country or city or house referred to as Sodom? We'll get to that next week. Why Sodom? But also he refers to it as what? Egypt, where also our Lord was crucified. And they of the people, the kindreds and tongues of the nations shall see their dead bodies 3 days and a half day, and shall not suffer their dead bodies to be put in graves. And this is truly an amazing prophecy. Because then it says the whole world will see them. How, when this is written, could all the world see two dead bodies in Jerusalem? What does God know? Fox News, CNN, MSNBC, worldwide, phone, everybody's phone, everybody's going to see it. And for 3.5 days, they're going to lay there, and the whole world's they're going to be giving each other gifts. It's going to be like the second Christmas. And it's like, hey, everybody. And then what happens after 3.5 days? They get up. They get up, and they're sent up into heaven, and then comes the end, right? Then comes all the things that God has said would happen, the seventh trumpet, and all of that starts really rolling. So we have here this reference to Egypt, and in fact, Jerusalem is Egypt. What does he mean by that? What does Egypt have to do with God's story? And actually, it's quite interesting to me. They're all quite interesting to me. Because we really see the way Israel thought of Egypt. They actually saw it as a place of salvation. They saw it as a place, believe it or not, of refuge, where they would be taken care of and provided for. They actually saw it as a place of strength. Are they? Should we be looking to earthly kingdoms, earthly religions, earthly people to be our salvation, our refuge, and our strength? No. And that's basically what he's saying here. Is he's calling Jerusalem this city which looks to the world, look to the things for these three things, as we will see, they have always done, all the way back to Abraham. These ideas got into their head that you look to the world for these things. And what was Jerusalem doing at this point in history in the book of Revelation? What will they be doing? Or frankly, what are they doing now? Are they still looking to the things of the world, the powers of the world, the ideas of the world, philosophy of the world to protect them and to care for them and meet their needs? Yes, they are. And for that, they will be what? Destroyed until, and they will, by the way, until they recognize what Egypt really means. And we'll look at that last. You ready to go? Mm-hmm. How do they see them as salvation? Let's go to Genesis. And we'll try to go pretty much in line here, so you can kind of just walk through the Bible together. Let's go to Genesis chapter 12. In Genesis chapter 12, we have Abraham and Sarah. They are in the promised land. They are doing what God has instructed them to do. They are still waiting for the heir to come. And they're going to do some dumb things, as we talked about this morning. But famine came. And when you're in an agrarian society, what does famine mean? It's death. You cannot give water to the animals. You cannot give water to the crops. And eventually you can't give water to yourself. So you either starve to death or you die of thirst. And who's there to help you? And again, he's in basically a foreign land, isn't he? It's just him and his family. There's not other family. He left other family. He left those places. And where does Abraham go? Genesis chapter 12, verse 10. And there was a famine in the land, the promised land, and Abram went down into Egypt to sojourn there, for the famine was grievous in the land. Already, before they're even really a nation, before Isaac is even born, where does Abraham look to for salvation when he has a need? Egypt. How long is that going to last? A long time. This is where you go. Because Egypt has what? The river. They have the Nile. They have that. They've got the crops. And while others may be drying up, it was always this idea that they would have the stuff, right? So we will go there to find. In fact, this was so ingrained in them. Let's go to Isaac in Genesis chapter 26. And by the way, anybody know what Abram and Sarai did when they were in Egypt? They pretended that she was his sister. Pharaoh thought she was gorgeous at about 65, I think, at that time. So maybe even 75. So, yeah. Good looking lady, evidently. Genesis chapter 26, verse 1. This is during the time of Isaac. So this is the next generation. There was famine in the land beside the first famine that was in the days of Abraham. I love the Bible. It's very clear on this. This is now a second one. And Isaac went unto Abimelech, king of the Philistines, unto Gerar. So he went there to try to find some help. And the Lord appeared unto him and said, Go not down into Egypt, dwell in the land which I shall tell thee of. So he already has, where do you go if you have a need? You go to where? Egypt. Fortunately, he listened to God, and God said don't, so he stayed where? In Gerar. Did God provide for him? But you already see this mindset getting set up, don't you? So that, you remember where the story went from here? Isaac had 2 sons, Esau and Jacob. Jacob was the chosen one. Jacob had 12 sons. And one of those sons was sold to the Ishmaelites, the Midianites, and sent to where? Egypt. Right? By the way, I found this interesting. Anybody know who Ishmael married? His mom found an Egyptian woman for him to marry. So it's kind of, you wonder where the Ishmaelites were traveling back and forth and trading stuff back and forth with Egypt. Well, they were related in a way. So they already had relationships. So the Ishmaelites or the Midianites, you can look it up either way. And they were sitting there and they were doing those kinds of things. And we know that Joseph then went to the land. And this is all part of God's plan, wasn't it? That he'd go there and he'd become what? A ruler to preserve his people and all the people of the world. So that Egypt would be a what? When they had 7 years of bounty, Egypt would be the one to store it up so that when they have 7 years of famine, Egypt would be the place of what? Prosperity and salvation. Salvation for who? Let's go to chapter 41, verse 57. Starting in chapter 41, verse 57, going into chapter 42. And all countries came into Egypt to Joseph for to buy corn, meal, because that the famine was sore in all lands. This was the one place. God even used Egypt as a place to be the salvation of all. Now when Jacob saw that there was corn in Egypt, Jacob said unto his sons, Why do you look one upon another? Why are you sitting around looking at each other? You say, we're all starving. I don't know. What are you going to do? I don't know. What do you want to do? What are you going to do? It's like, stop looking at each other. We know where there's food. And he said, Behold, I have heard that there is corn in Egypt. Get you down thither and buy for us from there, that we may live and not die. And Joseph's 10 brothers went down to buy corn in what? Egypt. And we know the story. He did not say who he was. They had to bow down to him, just like the visions said, just like the dreams said. And they had to do those things, and he played with them a little bit and got Benjamin to come. And eventually, though, what? brought his family. In fact, let's go to Genesis chapter 50. At the very end, after Jacob dies, they're all there in Egypt, they're all saved. The Bible's very, very clear that God did this to save his people. Using who? Using Egypt. Chapter 50, verse 19. And Joseph said unto his brothers, fear not, for am I in the place of God? Yes, Dad's dead. I'm not going to kill you now. Should he? Well, no, he shouldn't. Get that idea out of your head. I know what you're thinking. But no. But as for you, you thought evil against me, but God meant it unto good, to bring to pass, as it is this day, to save much people alive. Now therefore fear you not, I will nourish you and your little ones. And he comforted them and spake kindly unto them. So we see here, seen as a place of salvation, and actually used by God as a place of salvation. So if you're Israel, what's basically in your DNA? If you've got a problem, where do you go? Go to Egypt. Need food? Go to Egypt. Got problems? Go to Egypt. What does God say? Not always. What do you tell Isaac? Don't go to Egypt. Hang out with the Philistines. That's where Gerar was. Hang out with them. That's better than going down to Egypt. Just because God used them once, does that mean that's his intent to always use them? Will God sometimes use the things of this world to meet our needs? Does that mean we're there to trust in them? No, not at all.
Yeah.
Trust in him. Whatever he wants to use. In fact, what's interesting is we know what happened after that. There came somebody's not happy. There came a Pharaoh who didn't remember Joseph. You always wonder how that's possible. Until you realize that happens all the time. Nobody remembers history. Nobody keeps up. The next generation has no idea of anything that happened before. And he had no idea all that stuff. And he looked around and there were all these people where? In Goshen. Just people, these foreigners. No, this is bad. If somebody comes and fights us, they may join them. This is terrible. But what do we see here? Let's go first of all to Genesis. Back up a little bit to Genesis chapter 15. Let's get a little reminder from last week. That going to Egypt was part of whose plan? God's plan. And not just to save them from starvation. That was his plan all along. In fact, look what he said to Abraham. Chapter 15, verse 13. And God said unto Abram, know of a surety. And God says that. You know it's of a surety. Right? This is going to happen. That your seed shall be a stranger in a land that is not theirs, and shall serve them, and they shall afflict them 400 years. And also that nation whom they shall serve will I judge, and afterward shall they come out with great substance. Isaac, Jacob, Joseph, prophecy comes. And they find themselves in a land, and eventually there comes a Pharaoh who doesn't remember Joseph, and they are called to serve them. And they are afflicted. But God does what? Brings them out. You ever wonder why? Why is this part of God? How could that be part of God's plan?
Because the sin of the people in the land of Canaan hadn't
Come
burbled enough.
Yeah, hadn't come to fruition enough. All of it is in God's timing, right? And to think about it, he had a way to get his people out of a hostile area where they would have been constantly just berated by other people into a land that for a very long time was their very own, where they could grow to 1 million people. Is that a lot? And to live nicely. Yes, they're going to have to be slaves for a while. Yes, they're going to be afflicted. Yes, things. But when they come out, they're also going to have great substance. They're going to loot the most powerful country in the world. How did they become the most powerful country in the world? Well, because of Joseph. Because basically, Egypt looted the entire world over that famine thing. So you got all the wealth of the world, and they're going to take that wealth of the world, and they're going to come into a land where the cities are built, the vineyards are planted, the orchards are all up and running, and God's going to hand them the keys to a country. Isn't that cool? In fact, look at Genesis chapter 47:27. That's exactly what happened. And Israel dwelt in the land of Egypt in the country of Goshen, and they had possessions therein and grew and multiplied exceedingly. Until that Pharaoh came along and gave them all that hassle, but God said that was going to happen anyways. Anybody want to guess how long they were in Egypt? 430 years. Just as God said. God had a plan. God was coming to fruition. So, clearly, God sees Egypt as a place of refuge, right? A place to grow, a good place for them to be, right? No. It's not a place of salvation except when God wants it to be a salvation. It's a place of, yes, it was a refuge for the people to grow and multiply and everything, but only when God wants it to be, right? In fact, wasn't that their problem once they left? God destroyed them with the 10 plagues, took care of Egypt, the people were let go. And let's count them up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times where they specifically said, let's go back to where? Let's go back to Egypt. And that's just the 5 times before they got to the promised land. Let's go take a look at them real quick. Let's go to Exodus. So we're in Genesis, make a little right and go to Exodus. Exodus chapter 14. Verses 10 through 12. Pharaoh changes his mind. I always get because somebody wasn't there to draw his bath that morning or to give him his cornflakes or whatever. I don't know why, but that's right. And when they figured that out, he takes his army and he's chasing them. And of course, they're stopped at the Red Sea. And when Pharaoh drew nigh, the children of Israel lifted up their eyes, and behold, the Egyptians marched after them, and they were sore afraid. And the children of Israel cried out unto the Lord. And they said unto Moses, because there was no graves in where? Egypt. Thou hast taken us away to die in the wilderness. Wherefore hast thou dealt thus with us to carry us forth out of Egypt? Is it not this the word which we did tell you in Egypt, saying, let us alone, that we may serve our friends, the Egyptians? I added the friends part. But they weren't so bad. Better than dying out here, right? For it had been better for us to serve the Egyptians than we should die in the wilderness. So we're talking days out. They're already what? Egypt was our refuge. Egypt was our safe place. Sure, we were servants, but we were alive and it was a refuge, right? Is that a problem with the mindset? How about chapter 16? Yes. They get across the Red Sea just fine on dry land. Pharaoh and his armies are destroyed. But now they need something again. Something called food. I mean, need food? Chapter 16, verse 1. And they took their journey from Elam, and all the congregation of the children of Israel came unto the wilderness of Sin. That's a wonderful place. Which is called Elam and Sinai on the 15th day of the 2nd month after their departing out of the land of Egypt. And the whole congregation of the children of Israel murmured against Moses and Aaron in the wilderness. And the children of Israel said unto them, would to God we had died by the hand of the Lord in the land of Egypt, when we sat by the flesh pots, and when we did eat bread to the full. For you have brought us forth into this wilderness to kill the whole assembly with hunger. That was our safe place. That was our refuge. That was the place we had all the bread we could want. It's a low standard, but still. And some flesh pots, right? By the way, what did God then give them? Manna. Every day. Twice on Friday, so they have to work on Saturday. Right? Gave exactly what they needed. But again, their first thought was, where is their refuge? Egypt. How about chapter 17? What else do you need other than food out in the wilderness? Water. Now, I'd already done the bitter water, but they're out of water again, chapter 17. And all the congregation of the children of Israel journeyed from the wilderness of Sin after their journeys, according to the command of the Lord, and pitched in Rephidim, and there was no water for the people to drink. And keep remembering, who's actually leading them? It's not Moses leading them, it is God. Remember? The cloud by day and the fire by night. I mean, he's leading them, and he leads them to this place where there is no water. Just dirt, rocks, as far as the eye could see. Wherefore the people did chide with Moses, and said, Give us water that we may drink. And Moses said unto them, Why chide you with me? Wherefore do you tempt the Lord? The people thirsted there for water, and the people murmured against Moses and said, Wherefore is this, that thou hast brought us up out of Egypt to kill us and our children and our cattle with thirst? We should have stayed where? This isn't a fun trip, is it? Wouldn't you hate to go on a car trip and all the kids said the whole time was, I wish I was home. I wish I was home. How come we're not home? I want to be in my bed. I want my video game. I want this. I want that. Why am I home?
That's why you put them on when you put them on the roof.
That's right. Time to the roof. So it's just, and that's what they're doing because their mindset is what? Where is their happy place? Where's God taking them? The promised land, land of milk and honey, a perfect place for them. And all they can think about is, let's go back. In fact, go to Numbers chapter 11. Leviticus, Numbers. Let's pick up here after Sinai. So they get the Ten Commandments, they get the law, they did the whole golden idol thing. The idiots they are. They did all that kind of stuff. They built all the tabernacles. Spent quite a bit of time there in Sinai. And now they're on the move again. And here in Numbers chapter 11, starting in verse 4. And the mixed multitude that was among them fell a-lusting. And the children of Israel also wept again and said, Why? Who shall give us flesh to eat? They've been eating what? Manna. Every day. For at this point, probably a little over a year, maybe a year and a half. That's a long time. How many would eat the same thing from breakfast, lunch, and dinner every day for a year and a half? Almost 2 years.
It's food.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But as I tell the kids, if you're tired of something your parents are doing and you like something else, what should your request be? Please. First, thank you. Thank you for giving me this. Thank you for taking care of me. May I please have? Well, what's their reaction? How come we don't have any meat? I don't want meat. We remember the fish which we did eat in where? Egypt, freely, the cucumbers and the melons and the leeks and the onions and the garlic, but now our soul is dried away. There is nothing at all beside this manna before our eyes. That's not thankful. That's not appreciative. And by the way, you might know what God did. Oh, you want meat? I'll give you meat. You're going to eat nothing but meat for 30 days. It's going to be coming out of your nostrils, and some of you are going to get sick from it, because what does meat do over a 30-day period that manna does not do? Yeah, it gets fresh every day. So you're not getting fresh meat every day. So it's a problem. So again, what are their thoughts? That's our place. How could it possibly be so? They were slaves there. They were wanting to kill their firstborn sons, all their sons. Well, as soon as they were born, wanted to just throw them in the river. They were treated poorly, beaten by their taskmasters. They're like, oh, but they had food. And the worst one, chapter 14. God brought them to the promised land, didn't he? About a 2-year journey. Brought them to the promised land. They sent the 12 spies in. 2 spies, Joshua and Caleb, came back and said, let's go. Yes, flowing milk and honey, beautiful orchards, beautiful vines. They brought these bunches of grapes this big. 2 people had to carry them. Man, it was beautiful. They had cities, beds, clothes. They've been wearing the same clothes for 2 years. There were places, there was wonderful, there's walled cities, but that's the way they looked at it. How did the other 10 spies describe it? There are walled cities, there are armies, there are giants. Yeah, it's nice, but God can't do it. And got all the people to say that too. In fact, look at chapter 14, verse 1. And all the congregation lifted up their voice and cried, and the people wept that night. And all the children of Israel murmured against Moses and against Aaron, and the whole congregation said unto them, Would God that we had died in the land of Egypt, or would God we had died in this wilderness? Better to die out here than to die in there. And wherefore hath the Lord brought us into this land to fall by the sword, that our wives and our children should be a prey? Were it not better for us to return to where? Egypt. Let's go back. And of course God said, well, this generation of decision makers are going to die in this desert over the next 38 years. We'll bring the next generation. And of course people immediately say, well, we'll go in, okay. We'll go in. And they tried to fight their way in, and they couldn't, because God wasn't with them. And did God bring that next generation in? Yeah. Did God defeat those walled cities? God defeat those giants? God defeat those armies? In fact, when they did it trusting God, they didn't lose anybody. Nobody's wives and children were prey when they did it God's way and trusted Him. But their mind was still what? Egypt is our refuge. Egypt is our salvation. Egypt is that place. Instead of trusting who? Who is their salvation? Who is their refuge? And this continued into the time of Kings. Let's go to 1 Kings chapter 3. By the way, in Deuteronomy, where Moses told that next generation before they went into the land, told them the law. It's always amazing to me that in Deuteronomy, Moses says, when you get in the land, you will want a king. God knows everything. He's so smart. You're going to want a king. And when you get a king, which is a bad idea, but when you get a king, one thing he should not do is look to who? Egypt. Not look to return to Egypt or multiply to himself horses and things like that. In other words, don't look to the things of this world for what? Strength. Anyone want to guess who blew that one already? Solomon. 1 Kings chapter 3, verse 1. He did a couple of things. And Solomon made affinity with who? Pharaoh, king of Egypt. And took Pharaoh's daughter and brought her into the city of David, which is also known as what? Jerusalem, which Revelation refers to as Sodom and Egypt. Until he had made an end of building his own house and the house of the Lord and the wall of Jerusalem round about. In fact, later on, Pharaoh even comes and destroys a city so he can give it to his daughter as a gift. So they're hand in hand here. He's already making an affinity with who? This is one of his first wives. Some even say it was his first one. First of how many? 700, 300 concubines. Ridiculous, right? Because he was looking to who? Looking to already outside of God's promised land, outside of God for his strength. Now let's make an affinity with him. In fact, look at chapter 10. 10, verse 28. What else did he do? And Solomon had horses brought out of where? Egypt. Don't return to Egypt. Don't multiply to yourself horses. So Solomon says, oh, so I should get horses from Egypt.
Of course.
That makes sense. He even bought chariots in verse 29. So he's buying all kinds of stuff and basically getting money. And we know he taxed the people overly in order to spend all this stuff, to get these things and give wealth to Egypt so he could have what? relationships with them, strength from them, and horses and chariots from them, right? In fact, let's go to 2 Kings chapter 17. 2 Kings chapter 17, verse 4. And the king of Assyria found conspiracy in Hoshea. Hoshea was the king of the northern kingdom, king of Israel. For he had sent messengers to So, king of who? Egypt. So Assyria is coming down and attacking Israel, Samaria, Israel. And he comes down, and who does the king of Israel turn to? God? No. Judah? No. Who? Egypt. Egypt is my strength. And by the way, they did not fare well. Syria really didn't have a whole lot of problem taking care of Egypt. So, in fact, look at 2 Kings chapter 18, verses 21 through 24. And this is such an amazing. First of all, you need to know who's talking. Sennacherib. Sennacherib is basically an ambassador coming from Assyria. And look what he says to the king of Israel. In chapter 18, verse 21. Now behold, you trust upon the staff of this bruised reed, even upon Egypt. So Assyria is even noting, hey, dummy, you're resting on Egypt to save you. They even figured this out. Even upon Egypt, on which if a man lean, it will go into his hand and pierce it. So is Pharaoh, king of Egypt, unto all that trust on him. But you say unto me, we trust in the Lord our God. Isn't that not he whose high places and whose altars Hezekiah hath taken away, and hath said to Judah and Jerusalem, you shall worship before this altar in Jerusalem? You say, no, we're not trusting in Egypt. We're trusting in God. It's like, no, wait a minute. Judah trusts in God. They got the temple and stuff like that. I don't know what you guys are doing. You're not trusting in God. Verse 23. Now therefore I pray thee, give pledges to my lord the king of Assyria, and I will deliver thee 2,000 horses. There's those horses again. If you be able on thy part to set riders upon them. If you happen to have 2,000 people that can actually sit on a horse, which they're pretty decimated at this point. Verse 24. How then wilt thou turn away the face of one captain of the least of my master's servants, and put thy trust on Egypt for chariots of horsemen? You're going to turn me away and put your trust in who? Egypt? Verse 25. Note this one. Am I now come up without the Lord against this place to destroy it? The Lord said to me, go up against the land and destroy it. Your God told me to destroy you, Israel. You're not looking to God for help. You're looking to Egypt. And I can take out Egypt pretty easily. So let's make a deal. By the way, do they? No. They do not. Because they really believe and put their trust in Egypt as their strength. Isaiah had a lot to say about this. Let's go to Isaiah. I just picked a couple, because Isaiah, frankly, throughout the book of Isaiah, is constantly blasting the people because they keep putting their trust in who? Egypt. Stop putting your trust in Egypt. Egypt can't save you. Isaiah chapter 30, verses 1 through 3. Woe to the rebellious children, saith the Lord, that take counsel, but not of me, not of God, and that cover with a covering, but not of my spirit, that they may add sin to sin, that walk to go down into where? Egypt, and have not asked at my mouth to strengthen themselves in the strength of Pharaoh, and to trust in the shadow of Egypt. Therefore shall the strength of Pharaoh be your shame, and the trust in the shadow of Egypt your confusion. Do not trust. And this is the same time as Sennacherib and the Assyrians are attacking. Isaiah is telling them. So Isaiah also is prophesying to them. Everybody's telling them what? Don't trust in Egypt. Trust in God. Turn to God. How about 31:1? Next chapter. Here's a message for those who are going down to Egypt. Woe to them that go down to Egypt for help, and stay on horses, and trust in chariots, because they are many, and in horsemen, because they are very strong. But they look not unto the Holy One of Israel, neither seek the Lord. And that's the problem, isn't it? Who is their strength? Not Egypt.
Not Egypt.
Not anybody in this world. And by the way, they did at other times look to other nations as well. And sometimes they even reach out the Assyrians to try to beat them, or the Syrians to go against them. But Egypt was the one. Throughout history of Israel, Egypt is the one they always went back to. And they thought, they're the ones that can help us. In fact, we won't go there for time, but Jeremiah, during the time of Jeremiah, people were leaving Israel. Anybody want to guess where they were going? Egypt. Because they said, if we go to Egypt, we will be safe. When we go to Egypt, then we will be able to live. They looked at it again as their what? Their refuge and their salvation. You know what Jeremiah says? God says, Egypt will be destroyed because of you, and y'all are going to die down there. And by the way, they were. Egypt was completely wiped out. And we saw they did make a last-ditch effort to march on Euphrates, and Nebuchadnezzar completely wiped them out. And they were, as the Bible said, never heard from again. They were never a player again. So they never really crossed their own borders, never came and attacked, never did anything. They just kind of basically tried to hold on to everything they had. In fact, anybody want to know what happened to Egypt after that? They became Greek. Because after who? Alexander the Great is split up. So Cleopatra and all those people, none of them were Egyptian. All of them were Greeks. And then who took over after that? The Romans. So they had no play. And it's exactly, if you read Jeremiah, it's exactly. Ezekiel, same message. Hosea, same message. Don't go down there. Don't trust in them. Don't do those things. Trust instead in who? In God. And Isaiah, these verses are the one where he says they're going down. Egypt's going to be destroyed. So don't put your trust in those things. So why, in Revelation, does he call Jerusalem Egypt? Because what were the people in Jerusalem doing? They were trusting in the things of this world for what? Salvation. They were trusting in the things of this world for what? Refuge. They were trusting in the things of the world for, and rejecting who? Look at Matthew chapter 2. See, Egypt played a very important role, though, in another event. And that's the coming of our Lord Jesus Christ. In Matthew chapter 2, verse 13, a couple years after his birth, and we have the three wise men, or the wise men, well, how many? No idea. Wise men came. Where did God tell Joseph to take his little baby and his wife and go for a refuge? Egypt. In fact, look what it says in Matthew chapter 2, verse 13. And when they were departed, behold, the angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream, saying, and those departed are the wise men when they had departed, because they were instructed not to go back and tell Herod what happened and where they were. Arise and take the young child and his mother and flee into Egypt, and be thou there until I bring thee word, for Herod will seek the young child to destroy him. In fact, he did. He killed all the little boys in the entire area. When he arose, he took the young child and his mother by night and departed into Egypt, and was there until the death of Herod, that it might be fulfilled which was spoken of the Lord by the prophet, saying, out of Egypt have I called my son. Which I find this interesting, because while they were seeking from the world salvation, refuge, and strength, they should have been looking to the one who came out of Egypt, as prophesied, as their what? Strength, refuge, and salvation. Which brings us all the way back to Joshua. Let's go back to Joshua again. Joshua 24:14. We'll end here tonight. They have conquered the land, controlled it. They still have a lot of work to do, and they don't do most of it. But as Joshua is about to pass from the scene, he says these words to all the people. Now therefore fear the Lord and serve him in sincerity and in truth, and put away the gods which your fathers served on the other side of the flood and in Egypt. In other words, the idols your fathers served on the other side of the Euphrates and in Egypt. And serve ye the what? Lord. So who should we be looking to solely for our strength? And worshiping him only. Who should we be looking for refuge in times of trouble? God. And God, not the idols, not the other things of this world, not countries or anything like that. Who should we look to for salvation? God. He may use things of this world at times to bring about those things, but we don't put our trust in those things. We put our trust in the God, right? Who came just as he said he would to save us all, right? So when it says they are like Sodom and Egypt, specifically when it comes to Egypt, is because they were trusting in the things of this world for salvation, refuge, and strength, and they weren't trusting in God. Anybody want to guess why they called them Sodom? We'll look at that next week. All right? It's not exactly what you may think. So we'll take a look at the history of Sodom, all the way back to the time of Lot. So that's the first time we really get a shot at them. So we'll take a look at them and why they're called that. So certainly from who they're putting their trust in. Don't want to be in Egypt, do we? We want to be those who put our trust solely in God, right?